So here's an article from 1859 that is talking about the Chiriqui gold images, or these, I think, like little figures that were found in graves, I believe, in Panama, Costa Rica, etc. And I'm not going to read the whole article, but just point a few things out. But you can pause and read the whole thing if you want. But anyway, the very beginning, it just says those who are desirous of seeing or obtaining something very curious should go see Bailey and Company, the jewelers, and inspect the golden images from the graves of Chiriqui. In themselves, they are grotesque and odd enough. And I'm going to show pictures of them later on. So, um, so anyway, over to the right, he just made a comment about, he said that, but to the man who has labored at that primitive mythology, which lies at the root of all mythologies, just as the vanished Aryan tongue lies at the root of all Indo-European languages, these images are of incredible interest. So I just thought it was interesting. He wrote the word Arian. So did he really mean Aryan, like the Aryan race? That's what I'm thinking he meant. But it was just weird that he typed Arian because I have been talking about recently in other videos of Arian Christianity from Arius. And that's how they spell it. So I was a little confused, but I think they meant Arian. Anyway, under that it says, where is it? It said the gold digger who unearthed the amulets is not more overwhelmed with overpowering feeling at their discovery than the student at the tremendous flood tide of proof of identity between the old civilization of the two hemispheres which flows from them. So it's just interesting that America was known by people in ancient times, is what he's saying there. Wasn't found by Columbus. It wasn't even found by the Vikings. It's not a new world. It wasn't virgin lands. Obviously, from what they're saying here, Asiatics were here thousands of years ago, and from other videos I've discussed, the white race was here thousands of years ago as well. And I think that there was two separate civilizations. They fought for centuries, millennia, and then ended up turning into um, the Indian race, the red man or whatever you want to call it, that then the Vikings and Columbus came back to. So anyway, then it said, there is the golden fish amulet, so well known in all lands, typical, like all of them, of generation, a mythic type, preserved even by the Gnostic Freemasons, which I don't really understand those two words together, of the Middle Ages and borrowed from the East by Orientalized Christians to symbolize Christ. So it's just interesting that it says that the fish symbol, which I assume or I think it means it represents Christ as a fisher of men, is what I thought. And here it says has roots and parallels in Eastern and possibly Gnostic traditions. So is the fish symbol legit? Not legit? I don't really know, but it's just interesting they trace it back to there, and not the Western um, Christians. So anyway, then under that it's talking about phallic symbols and whatnot, and it says uh, that the balls Baal Peor and the hollow metallic Baal Moloch giving forth a roaring, bellowing, or pealing when children were burnt alive in him. Um, So yeah, obviously it's discussing pagan child sacrifice to Baal, Moloch, or Satan, and so is that what they found in Central or South America, which obviously we know the Canaanites and other pagan satanic peoples in the Middle East did back during Old Testament times. So yeah, that's what I think they're referring to there. And so see the connection, right? Is that people from the area that did that kind of stuff, obviously over centuries, migrated over to Central or South America and did the same thing. They brought it with them. Um, Here on the left, it says, there is also the double dragon headed figure with one head on its tail, which occurs in Chinese ornaments. and which is perfectly Chinese in its general appearance, though the prevailing style of these figures is Mexican. And then so you can see down below, I think the claim is that was found in Chiriqui, uh, Panama, is what I believe. Because when I searched for the Chiriqui images, this one popped up here, as well as the ones I'm going to show you on the next few slides. So if that's the case, if this was found in Mexico or Panama, wherever it was, and they're saying Asians were in South America or Central America in ancient times, then it would make sense that they would bring with them the dragon symbolism and the dragon worship and the possible sacrifice to these serpent entities. And I've talked about that in my videos on the Hakka and the Mongolians, right? Because in my opinion, they're from Cain. They are the direct offspring of Cain, and then they went and mixed with people in the Orient, and created the Turkic, like the cursed people, right? Like Canaan, Edom, etc. And then they made the Arabs and Turkic people and etc. So they're all essentially related, which is why they're all, for the most part, anti-Christian and anti-white. um, and yeah, anyway, so and then under that it says they afford to us convincing proof that Orientals once had intercourse with Mexico. And my opinion, it's not that they had intercourse with Mexico; it's that they were in Mexico and the whites were in Mexico, like the same area. And like I said, there used to be, I think, conflict between them. And I've talked about that in other videos. So anyway, that the religion which they brought here was modified by something like Chinese influence. But I don't think it was Chinese influence. I think it was actual Asiatics, the Hakka and the Mongolians and others from East Asia that ended up migrating to Central and into the Americas. And it says, possibly, however, at so early a time that Chinese culture had not then assumed its present form. And then it says, and finally, that Professor Newman's work on the Chinese in Mexico in the 5th century is entitled to more attention than it has received. So I guess that professor is claiming that the Chinese or Asiatics were in the Americas back 1,500 years ago. And I would say maybe even earlier than that. Again, and we know the whites were here back around 3,700 years ago, possibly. So no reason to think that the Asians couldn't have gotten here somehow as well. Um, so, and the author of that book, or yeah, the author mentioned there, Carl Friedrich Newman, was interesting. He was a Jew as well, so you got to take everything as a from Jews with a grain of salt. Um, but I think what I find sometimes is the facts they provide are legit, but their conclusions that they draw from the facts are either incorrect because they can't think the way that we would think how to come to those conclusions, or they're just liars. So, right, and they can't have us know the truth. I'm not saying this guy was, I don't know, but just you got to be aware of what you're reading. So, but anyway, I'm going to read some of a book about him from a guy named Charles G. Leland. And he quotes some of what Newman states or wrote, and I think also what he wrote as well, Leland. So here's a few passages I'm going to read. And it said, though Buddhism has now been steadily declining for many centuries, it still numbers more followers than Christianity or any other religion on the face of the earth, for they are literally counted by hundreds of millions. So that's interesting. I had no idea. I thought Buddhism was a minor religion. I don't know if it is today, but if it was hundreds of millions back when there was only a couple of billion people 200 years ago, then wouldn't we think that there's probably billions of Buddhists now? I don't know. Um, yeah, and then under that it says many, and indeed far too many writers are guided in every department of science by a desire to prove or disprove Christianity, rather than to find out what is true. To them, all the extraordinary coincidences of serpent worship, monolithic groups, cups, winged globes, or crosses in monuments are merely phenomena of an accidental nature and the most natural things in the world, such as must have occurred to everybody. And my note, obviously, that's completely retarded to think that those are just coincidences or whatever. They're not, but we're gonna see what he says after that. He says, to the contrary, it seems most probable that such very positive matters of religions and myths, which are difficult to learn, are, with the customs which they involve, more generally transmitted, however remotely, right, however far back, than easily invented, right? So it's not that all these different people around the world just made stuff up randomly by themselves. Everything is connected. All these people have similar history. They're related by blood, and they passed down this mythology or symbolism as they migrated. And we see that with the white race when we've gone all over the world. And you can obviously, as he's saying here, see that with the serpent worship. It's not that everybody all around the world just decided, oh, let's just worship a snake, right? Somebody in Mongolia, somebody in the Andes, somebody in Alaska, somebody in Turkey. Of course not. All those people are related by blood. So just over centuries, they've bred with other people and they've changed their skin color, what they look like, but the inside is still the same. So, um, yeah, and then on the right, it says, oh, it just makes a random note by the American government as wearing a mask of the Christian religion. Now, this book that I'm reading from, I think it's from the 1870s. So it's kind of interesting. The author took offense to that. He didn't agree with that. But I would say that's true. Maybe the people were Christian, but our government, even in the 1870s, was completely Judaized and satanic. It was not Christian. Like I said, maybe local governments and the people, sure, of course. But the people running the government itself, no. So it's just an interesting remark the guy made. So under that are some, I think, snake figurines from the Chiriqui find, whatever it's called. Um, Chiriqui, yeah. Here's an artifact on the right, some kind of like, I don't know what it is, kind of serpent, dragon, frog looking thing, I guess. I don't really know. Totally, I mean, it looks Asiatic, right? It's interesting, little circle things. Is that some kind of like symbol for eternity or something? I have no clue. But anyway, it's interesting because when I asked the digital Jew, the Chat GPT, to bring up serpent-like motifs from Chiriqui, and it brought up this and the other ones I'm going to show you. So they're telling you that these are supposedly serpent-like figurines. And as I mentioned before, the serpent worship all around the world isn't an accident. And I did a video, two videos, one on the top left there about serpent worship. That was from 1889. A really fascinating book. I read what I thought was important from the book, but I'd highly recommend getting the PDF and reading the whole book because it really explains that nothing is just by accident. And then on the bottom left is a video I did on the Hakka Chinese dragon worship and trying to trace their origin and whatnot. And yeah, because like I said, I think the Shaka, what am I talking about? The Hakka are descendants of the Mongolians and others, and ultimately descended from Cain, so who is the serpent. So it naturally makes sense that they would worship the serpent. So here's another figurine, kind of crazy looking. Looks like he's holding two snakes that he's pulling out from his legs, and maybe he himself is a serpent or dragon or something. I don't really know. Here's a couple of more figurines. Looks like there's little man-eating teeth there, right? Because I guess they did sacrifice. Well, I read that people in that area did cannibalism and stuff. I don't know if that's true or not, but they don't look like normal people. The way they carved their faces or whatever. And here, I believe, is the last image I have. Um, So I don't know what that's supposed to be. It came up again as a serpent, like a flying dragon. It looks kind of retarded. But anyway, yeah. So